Think you can handle the spotlight? Brock Simmons' voice cut through the chatter, sharp, teasing, and impossible to ignore as Aaliyah Johnson stepped onto the stage for the school talent show, clutching her sheet music like it contained her entire world. The auditorium smelled of polished wood and faint popcorn, the bright overhead lights reflecting off the glossy floor in a way that made every footstep echo like a drumbeat in her chest. Students and teachers alike turned to watch, whispers rippling through the crowd, a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. Aaliyah's sneakers squeaked softly against the stage, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of expectation and the memory of all the times she had been overlooked. Brock leaned casually against the stage curtain, smirk in place, as if daring her to fail, while his friends snickered quietly from the wings. Principal Karen Whitmore sat in the front row, her posture rigid, lips pressed together, eyes flicking between the student performers with a calculated scrutiny that made the room feel colder than it actually was. Aaliyah inhaled deeply, the paper in her hands rustling, her fingers brushing against the edge as if drawing strength from it. She had spent weeks preparing, not just her performance, but the small speech that would follow, the ideas that would show she was more than the quiet girl everyone assumed she was. The spotlight hit her face, catching the curve of her cheekbones and the determined glint in her eyes. And for a moment the auditorium held its breath along with her, every head turning, every eye tracking her small movements. Brock raised an eyebrow, amusement and disbelief mingling on his face, clearly expecting her to falter, yet something in the way she held herself, the way she allowed herself to stand firm despite the laughter and the whispers, began to shift the atmosphere. The stage felt simultaneously enormous and intimate, each note she played on the piano resonating through the hall and sinking into the walls, the vibrations a subtle testament to her preparation and quiet resilience. The faint scent of stage polish mixed with the soft hum of the lights overhead created a sensory backdrop that tethered Aaliyah to the moment, grounding her even as her heart pounded with the rhythm of anticipation. As she finished the final chord, the silence was almost tangible, broken only by the rustle of papers and the shifting of feet as the audience processed what had just unfolded. She lifted her eyes, meeting Brock's for the briefest instant, and even though his expression was unchanged, there was a flicker, a crack in the facade, a hint that he hadn't expected such poise or capability from the girl he had mocked so effortlessly. The applause began hesitantly, a few hands clapping first, then a swell as the rest of the audience joined, the sound washing over her like a tide, filling the corners of the room where doubt had previously lingered. Principal Whitmore's gaze lingered on her a moment longer, a subtle nod barely perceptible, a silent acknowledgement that the quiet student had, in that brief performance, revealed a depth of talent and composure that the hierarchy of the school had failed to recognize until now. Aaliyah exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease slightly, the stage no longer a battleground but a space where her competence could quietly, yet unmistakably, assert itself, leaving the room poised on the edge between judgment and newfound respect. And in that suspended moment, the first seeds of reversal had been sown. The applause faded slowly, leaving a thick silence in the auditorium that pressed against Aaliyah Johnson like a tangible weight, her hands still resting lightly on the edge of the piano as she let the echoes of the final note linger in the polished wood. Brock Simmons shifted uneasily on the side of the stage, his confident smirk faltering just slightly, and the friends who had been chuckling moments ago now looked around at each other with uncertain expressions, their momentum of ridicule halted by the unexpected composure and skill of the girl they had underestimated. Principal Karen Whitmore remained in her front row seat, the rigid line of her shoulders softening imperceptibly as she studied Aaliyah, the overhead lights casting a cool glow over her sharp features, revealing the subtle furrow of concentration in her eyes. Aaliyah inhaled quietly, letting her chest rise and fall in measured rhythm, the lingering hum of the piano strings vibrating beneath her fingertips as she straightened her posture and scanned the room, noticing faces previously blank or amused now turned with curiosity, their expressions reflecting a mixture of surprise and contemplation. She took a tentative step back from the piano, feeling the polished stage under her sneakers, the smell of varnish and the faint scent of the flowers decorating the edge of the stage mingling in the air, grounding her even as her pulse raced with adrenaline. A teacher near the back of the auditorium whispered to a colleague, gesturing subtly toward Aaliyah, and the murmur spread slowly through the rows of students, a tide of attention shifting from mockery to respect, a ripple that reached even the far corners where the auditorium lights faded into shadow. Brock opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came, the sharp edge of his usual confidence dulled by the quiet authority she now exuded, the careful way she held herself suggesting competence far beyond her years, an innate poise that had not been present in the nervous tremor of earlier rehearsals. Principal Whitmore cleared her throat softly, the sound commanding without raising volume, and the room instinctively straightened, the subtle tension in the air reflecting a shift in power that had occurred almost imperceptibly, a transfer of attention and acknowledgement from the usual hierarchy of popular students and authority figures to the quiet determination of Aaliyah herself. She lowered her gaze briefly to the sheet music still in her hand, noting the familiar scribbles of her mother's annotations, the notes that had guided her through countless late nights of practice, and then lifted her eyes to meet the principal's, catching the briefest nod of approval that was almost imperceptible but unmistakable, a silent signal that the value of preparation and inner strength had been recognized. Around her, the audience's shifting posture and subtle gestures of engagement reflected a recalibration of perception, the previously assured laughter and whispers replaced by attentive curiosity, and in that space, Aaliyah felt the beginnings of an internal steadiness, a quiet confidence that had been seeded through years of unnoticed effort and careful observation. The stage, once a place of potential embarrassment and ridicule, now felt like a platform from which she could assert a voice, measured and deliberate, each movement purposeful, the polished wooden floor beneath her feet a stable anchor against the currents of expectation and judgment swirling around her. Even Brock, standing slightly apart, could not conceal the momentary flash of reconsideration, his posture betraying a flicker of awareness that perhaps the assumptions he had held about her were incomplete, that the careful cultivation of skill, preparation, and quiet courage could outshine the ostensible dominance of bravado. As Aaliyah exhaled, feeling the adrenaline ebbing slightly, the room began to fill with soft murmurs of approval, tentative applause that built gradually, a wave of acknowledgement that washed over her with subtle warmth, her small smile acknowledging not triumph and spectacle, but the quiet confirmation that she had, even in a few moments, shifted the balance of perception and set the stage for what was yet to come. As the applause softened into murmurs, Aaliyah Johnson remained on the stage, her hands gently resting on the piano, feeling the warmth of the wooden keys beneath her fingertips and the subtle vibration still lingering from her last note. The auditorium lights highlighted the tiny sheen of sweat along her hairline and the quiet determination in her eyes as she scanned the rows of students and teachers, noting the shift in energy, the small hesitations and glances that betrayed curiosity now replacing earlier ridicule. Brock Simmons leaned against the side of the stage, arms crossed, his usual smirk replaced by a subtle narrowing of his eyes, the edge of his confidence wobbling as he tried to make sense of the unexpected poise he had witnessed. A few students whispered among themselves, their heads turning back and forth between Brock and Aaliyah, clearly reassessing the dynamics they had taken for granted. Principal Karen Whitmore shifted slightly in her seat, the sharp line of her jaw softening for the briefest instant, as if acknowledging that Aaliyah's quiet resolve and prepared execution carried more weight than the surface judgments of popularity or social hierarchy. Aaliyah exhaled slowly, letting her chest rise and fall, sensing the invisible currents of the room turning in subtle ways, the polished wooden floor beneath her feet acting as a steady anchor against the surge of adrenaline and emotion. She glanced toward the piano bench, noting the precise placement of her sheet music and the faint markings her mother had left, symbols of discipline and preparation that reminded her she had earned this moment not by chance, but by diligence and care. Around the auditorium, murmurs grew slightly louder, the curiosity spreading like a ripple through the audience, teachers leaning forward, students shifting in their seats, and even Brock's friends glancing at one another with a flicker of doubt in their expressions. The scent of the stage lights mixed with the faint undertone of varnish and polished wood, grounding her senses as she allowed her eyes to meet Principal Whitmore's once more, catching a subtle nod of acknowledgement, a nearly imperceptible gesture that carried the weight of recognition, respect, and the first hints of trust. In that suspended moment, Aaliyah felt a quiet confidence settle into her shoulders, the tension easing as she realized the unspoken balance of attention and power was beginning to tip, her preparation and calm clarity creating a shift not through force or loud proclamation, but through measured presence and skillful execution. The auditorium seemed to breathe along with her, a collective exhale of anticipation and reassessment, and even Brock could not mask the faint flash of reconsideration as he processed the disruption of his assumptions, the idea that quiet preparation and subtle capability could outweigh the apparent dominance of his bravado. She stepped back from the piano, allowing the final note's resonance to fade completely, the polished floor reflecting the warm glow of the stage lights and the attentive gaze of her audience. The room no longer a place of potential embarrassment, but a space where her competence and calm authority quietly reshaped perception. The initial spark of reversal igniting the awareness that the smallest demonstration of poise and preparation could alter long-held assumptions and plant the seed for what would unfold in the moments ahead. After the gentle swell of applause and murmurs began to settle, Aaliyah Johnson stepped carefully toward the edge of the stage, her fingers brushing lightly against the smooth varnished surface, feeling the residual warmth of the piano strings beneath her palms, the notes still vibrating faintly through the wood. Brock Simmons remained near the curtain, arms crossed, a tightness in his jaw betraying the flicker of reconsideration in his expression as he watched her move with composed certainty. The auditorium, still bathed in the soft glow of overhead lights, carried the faint scent of polished wood and lingering floral arrangements, each detail sharp in Aaliyah's awareness as she took a moment to center herself, inhaling slowly and letting the rhythm of the space align with her own steady heartbeat. Principal Karen Whitmore leaned forward slightly in her chair, the edge of her notebook catching the light as she made subtle notes, her gaze tracking Aaliyah's every motion with a careful blend of curiosity and appraisal, as if measuring the depth of capability beneath the calm exterior. The rows of students shifted in their seats, whispers muted as they processed the shift in energy, the usual hierarchy of attention and dominance giving way to a new awareness sparked by Aaliyah's quiet composure and competence. She straightened, letting her shoulders relax, feeling the weight of expectation settle evenly across her frame, not as pressure but as a kind of gravity that tethered her focus to the present. And then she glanced toward Brock, meeting his eyes for a fraction of a second, noting the subtle change in the angle of his head, the almost imperceptible hesitation that indicated a recalibration of his assumptions. The hall felt suspended, the polished wooden floor beneath her shoes reflecting the lights above and the faces of the audience, a delicate mosaic of surprise, curiosity, and slowly dawning respect. She adjusted her posture slightly, mindful of the microphone's stand at the edge of the stage, the cold metal under her palm grounding her further, and then allowed her gaze to sweep across the room, catching the subtle nods of teachers, the widened eyes of peers, and the unmistakable spark of attention in Principal Whitmore's expression. The subtle vibrations of her earlier performance seemed to linger in the air, mingling with the quiet shuffle of students' feet and the low murmur of conversation as the tide of perception began to shift, the initial moment of judgment and ridicule dissolving into recognition of poise, preparation, and understated authority. Even Brock's stance softened marginally, a silent acknowledgement that the quiet resolve and skill he had once dismissed required reconsideration, the effortless confidence he had counted on challenged by Aaliyah's precise and deliberate presence. Aaliyah exhaled gently, the movements slow and controlled, the warmth of her own breath mingling with the ambient air of the auditorium as the stage, once a space of potential embarrassment, became a platform of subtle assertion, a place where her careful preparation and innate composure began to tip the balance of perception in her favor. The soft hum of the stage lights, the faint scent of varnished wood, and the attentive, shifting energy of the room coalesced around her, creating a moment suspended between anticipation and acknowledgement, and in that fragile, quiet space, The first seeds of genuine recognition and opportunity had been planted, leaving her grounded, poised, and ready for the next step in the unfolding sequence of events. As the last echoes of attention shifted through the auditorium, Aaliyah Johnson felt a momentary stillness settle over the stage, the polished floor reflecting the soft overhead lights that cast a warm, even glow across the faces of her peers and teachers alike. She straightened subtly, the subtle tension in her shoulders easing as she allowed herself a brief acknowledgement of how far she had carried her focus through preparation and practice. Brock Simmons lingered near the curtain, his expression still guarded, a flicker of uncertainty passing across his features as he measured the impact of what he had just witnessed, the usual assurance in his posture tempered by a dawning awareness that the quiet confidence Aaliyah had displayed demanded recognition beyond superficial judgments. Principal Karen Whitmore leaned back slightly, the subtle adjustment of her chair betraying an unspoken evaluation, her sharp eyes scanning the stage and the audience in tandem, noting the shift in dynamics. The way attention had subtly transferred from the conventional social hierarchy to the composed presence of the student who had commanded it through skill and measured poise. Aaliyah inhaled steadily, letting the rhythm of her own heartbeat align with the subtle vibrations left behind by the piano, the rich tones still lingering faintly in the polished wood beneath her fingertips. The faint scent of the varnished stage floor mixed with the delicate floral arrangements at the edges, creating a sensory anchor that kept her centered in the moment, each detail reinforcing the deliberate care she had taken to prepare herself for the attention she had long feared and now subtly commanded. The students shifted quietly in their seats, some exchanging glances that carried a newfound respect, while others nodded ever so slightly, the energy of whispered curiosity and cautious admiration rippling through the rows without overt acknowledgement. Brock's friends, previously animated with casual arrogance, now observed in silence, their laughter replaced by subdued contemplation as they registered the unexpected control and assurance of Aaliyah's presence. Principal Whitmore's gaze lingered just a moment longer on the student, a subtle nod imperceptible to all but the most attentive, a signal that the combination of preparation, poise, and quiet determination had established a measure of credibility that could not be dismissed. Aaliyah allowed her eyes to travel briefly across the room, taking in the attentive faces, the subtle movements of teachers leaning forward, and the shifting expressions of her peers, noting the contrast between prior assumptions and the recognition quietly settling in. She exhaled gently, the motion measured and deliberate, allowing the residual tension to ebb from her body as she stood firmly on the stage, the polished wood beneath her sneakers a stable platform against the shifting currents of perception and expectation swirling around her. The faint hum of the lights overhead, the soft scent of varnished wood, and the attentive gaze of the audience coalesced into a quiet rhythm, reinforcing her composure and highlighting the impact of her calm authority and deliberate actions. And in this subtle convergence of observation, respect, and measured acknowledgement, the initial seeds of recognition were sown, laying the foundation for the opportunities and shifts yet to unfold in the moments that would follow. After a moment of quiet reflection on the stage, Aaliyah Johnson allowed herself to take a slow, steady step toward the front edge, the polished wood cool beneath her sneakers, grounding her as the energy in the auditorium shifted subtly in response to her presence. The faint hum of the stage lights blended with the soft rustle of papers and movement from the audience, creating a delicate rhythm that underscored the unspoken tension and curiosity now filling the space. Brock Simmons shifted slightly, the angle of his shoulders betraying a flicker of surprise as he observed the deliberate calm of Aaliyah's posture, the poise in the way she held herself making his previous assumptions about her fade almost imperceptibly. Principal Karen Whitmore's gaze remained focused, the small tilt of her head indicating a careful assessment as she watched Aaliyah, weighing the quiet authority and competence radiating from her, and noting the subtle gestures that conveyed confidence without requiring loud declaration. Aaliyah glanced briefly toward the rows of students, observing the way their eyes tracked her movements, the muted whispers and shifting postures indicating that the balance of perception had begun to tilt, that the undercurrent of curiosity and newfound respect was steadily replacing the initial amusement and doubt. The stage, with its warm lights and polished surfaces, seemed to respond to her movements, the echoes of her earlier performance lingering faintly in the room, creating an almost tangible atmosphere of anticipation and recognition. Each inhalation drew in the subtle mix of varnished wood, soft floral arrangements, and the ambient warmth of the auditorium, allowing her to center herself, focus her thoughts, and prepare for the next moments without distraction or hesitation. Brock's expression remained guarded, yet the tension around his eyes suggested that the perception of dominance he had previously relied upon was being challenged in a quiet but undeniable way, his attention held captive by the calm assurance and deliberate presence of Aaliyah. The audience's posture reflected the same shift, teachers leaning forward with a subtle nod, students exchanging glances filled with curiosity and cautious admiration, the collective energy beginning to acknowledge her capacity and skill. Aaliyah's hands rested lightly on the piano once more, not to play but to reinforce her presence, a gentle anchor connecting her to the stage, to the moment, and to the growing awareness surrounding her. The subtle vibrations and warmth of the piano, combined with the attentive and shifting energy of the audience, provided a steady undercurrent that reinforced her composure, creating a sense of control without overt display. In this suspended moment, the polished stage floor beneath her feet, the lights above, and the careful attention of Principal Whitmore and the audience coalesced into a quiet affirmation of her abilities and character, the initial spark of acknowledgement that had begun in the previous moments now solidifying, establishing the foundation for influence, opportunity, and the unfolding reversal of perception that was just beginning to take hold. The soft hum of the auditorium lights seemed to hold a quiet tension as Aaliyah Johnson took a slow, deliberate step back from the piano, allowing the lingering resonance of the last chord to fade completely into the polished wood beneath her feet. The murmurs of curiosity and tentative admiration among the students and teachers alike grew slightly louder, a subtle acknowledgement that the previous moments had shifted the perception of her capabilities, and even the once confident Brock Simmons found himself momentarily unsure of how to respond, his posture rigid, jaw tight, eyes tracking her with an almost imperceptible hesitation. Principal Karen Whitmore remained poised in the front row, her gaze unwavering, taking in the details of Aaliyah's movements, the measured precision in the way she held herself, and the calm steadiness that had radiated from her throughout the performance. The gentle scent of varnish from the stage floor mixed with the soft aroma of flowers lining the stage edge, creating a subtle sensory backdrop that grounded Aaliyah as she inhaled slowly, drawing in the atmosphere around her and using it to focus her mind on the presence she was holding in the room. The students shifted in their seats, some leaning forward slightly, their attention captured not by spectacle, but by the understated authority and deliberate composure of a student who had refused to let previous assumptions define her, whose quiet determination had quietly recalibrated the expectations of everyone in the auditorium. Brock's friends exchanged glances, the confidence that had carried them through moments of casual amusement now tempered by the recognition that the quiet resolve and preparation of Aaliyah demanded acknowledgement, and a subtle ripple of reconsideration passed through the group. Aaliyah's hands rested lightly on the edge of the piano, her fingers tracing the smooth wood without tension, a grounding motion that reinforced her connection to the space and to the subtle shift in attention around her, her chest rising and falling in a controlled rhythm that mirrored the collective heartbeat of the room. Principal Whitmore's subtle nod, almost imperceptible, conveyed a silent acknowledgement of capability, a recognition that did not require words but resonated through the careful observation of her attentive gaze, signaling a moment of quiet validation that had been earned through preparation, poise, and thoughtful execution. The audience's collective posture reflected a subtle recalibration, the soft whispers and cautious movements of curiosity mingling with small nods of recognition, each individual processing the realization that quiet competence and steady confidence could command attention and respect without flamboyance or bravado. Aaliyah exhaled, letting her shoulders relax just enough to feel the tension ease, yet maintaining the careful alignment that spoke of readiness and focus, allowing the polished stage floor, the warm overhead lights, and the attentive eyes surrounding her to converge into a moment of poised equilibrium, a space in which the subtle reversal of perception had taken hold, setting the stage for the next unfolding chapter of influence, acknowledgement, and the quiet assertion of presence that would shape the events to come. The auditorium settled into a hushed anticipation, every eye now fixed on Aaliyah Johnson as she stood upright, her hands resting lightly at her sides, the soft echo of the piano still resonating faintly beneath the polished stage floor. The subtle shift in energy was palpable, a delicate transformation from earlier skepticism to quiet engagement, as Brock Simmons and his friends found themselves unable to interrupt or reclaim the dominance they had once assumed was theirs by default. Principal Karen Whitmore leaned forward slightly, her fingers tracing the edge of her notebook in a rhythm that mirrored the careful consideration in her eyes, assessing not only the performance that had unfolded but the composure, insight, and self-possession Aaliyah carried with her like an invisible shield. The audience's collective posture had changed. Students straightened, whispering soft assessments to one another, some nodding ever so slightly, the murmurs blending with the gentle hum of the lighting fixtures overhead. Aaliyah exhaled quietly, feeling the steadiness in her shoulders and the measured cadence of her breathing, letting the warm glow of the stage wash over her as she allowed herself to occupy the space fully, acknowledging the subtle acknowledgement of her peers without relying on overt applause or visible affirmation. Brock's gaze, once sharp with condescension, now wavered, the edge of confidence dulled by the recognition of poise and deliberate control that could not be dismissed or undermined. And even his body language betrayed a hesitation he had never experienced before in the presence of a student he had assumed to be weak. The faint scent of the stage varnish, mingled with the floral arrangements lining the wings, created a sensory rhythm that anchored Aaliyah to the moment, every detail reinforcing the sense that the auditorium itself had become a conduit for a quiet but undeniable shift in perception. Principal Whitmore's subtle nod, almost imperceptible, conveyed a recognition that extended beyond skill alone, acknowledging insight, preparation, and the unspoken confidence of a student who had consistently carried herself with respect and diligence despite previous oversight. Across the room, teachers exchanged brief, knowing glances, students leaned forward in their seats, and the once dismissive whispers of amusement had been replaced by a quiet contemplation of what they had witnessed. Aaliyah's gaze swept over the room, noting each reaction with a calm awareness, her posture relaxed yet deliberate, signaling a readiness to engage with whatever came next, while simultaneously allowing the room to process the quiet authority she now emanated. The warm reflections from the polished stage floor, the attentive eyes surrounding her, and the lingering hum of the piano merged into a tapestry of subtle acknowledgement, the combination of sight, sound, and atmosphere reinforcing the understanding that competence, poise, and careful preparation could quietly, without ostentation, alter long-held assumptions and command attention. In this suspended, focused moment, Aaliyah Johnson stood as the center of a slowly shifting dynamic, the undercurrent of recognition solidifying among her peers, Principal Whitmore, and even Brock Simmons, a quiet testament to the power of presence, preparation, and steady confidence that had begun to redefine the perceptions of those around her, planting the seeds for the unfolding events yet to come. The subtle shift in the auditorium was now undeniable as Aaliyah Johnson took a steady breath and allowed her eyes to sweep the room, noting how the energy had transformed around her, the quiet curiosity and measured attention replacing the previous undercurrent of doubt and amusement. The students who had whispered and glanced nervously now sat more upright, their expressions a mixture of surprise and consideration, and even Brock Simmons, though still standing near the curtain, showed a faint tightening of the jaw and a slight narrowing of the eyes, signaling that the assumptions he had carried into this room were beginning to falter under the weight of Aaliyah's composed presence. Principal Karen Whitmore shifted in her chair, the subtle tilt of her head conveying an appraisal not of performance alone, but of character, insight, and the deliberate composure Aaliyah had maintained throughout the unfolding moments. Aaliyah exhaled slowly, the rhythm of her breathing deliberate and controlled, anchoring herself with the warmth of the polished stage floor beneath her feet and the lingering resonance of the piano notes that had filled the hall just moments before. The scent of varnish mixed with faint floral aromas created a sensory tapestry that drew her attention to the present, each detail reinforcing her focus and steadying the confidence that had been cultivated through preparation and careful observation. Students exchanged glances, some with subtle nods, others with the quiet acknowledgement of respect that did not need to be spoken aloud, and the soft murmur of whispers through the audience reflected a gradual acknowledgement of Aaliyah's capacity to command attention and influence perception without overt assertion. Brock's stance remained rigid, but the slight flicker in his eyes betrayed the realization that quiet authority and consistent poise could surpass the performance of confidence he had relied on for social dominance. Principal Whitmore's hands rested lightly on her notebook, fingers brushing the pages as she leaned forward, her expression revealing a carefully measured approval, the unspoken message clear that competence and integrity could be recognized even when previously overlooked. The warm glow of the stage lights reflected across polished surfaces and attentive faces, reinforcing the subtle but powerful recalibration of attention and perception that Aaliyah had initiated. Each movement she made, each breath taken, communicated a confidence that was neither loud nor aggressive but quietly undeniable, and the room responded in kind, a collective recognition emerging organically through observation and reflection rather than verbal acknowledgement. Aaliyah's awareness of the shift in energy, the subtle nods and glances, and the attentive silence of those around her provided both affirmation and momentum, reinforcing the understanding that deliberate preparation and poise could quietly command respect and attention. In this moment of suspended awareness, the stage floor beneath her, the attentive gazes around her, and the soft, persistent echoes of her earlier performance coalesced into a cohesive recognition of her ability, signaling that the influence she had begun to establish would continue to unfold in the subsequent interactions, planting the seeds for a transformation in perception and a recalibration of the subtle hierarchies within the room. The moment shifted imperceptibly as Aaliyah Johnson felt the subtle change ripple through the auditorium, the collective attention she had cultivated now settling into a quiet anticipation that seemed to hang in the air like a tangible weight. Her posture remained poised, shoulders relaxed yet aligned, hands lightly brushing the edge of the piano, the polished wood still warm under her touch from the vibrations of her earlier performance. Brock Simmons stood near the side curtain, a flicker of recognition crossing his face, the smirk he had relied on now absent, replaced by a hesitant awareness that the quiet authority and careful composure Aaliyah displayed demanded more consideration than he had ever afforded her. Principal Karen Whitmore's eyes followed every small movement, her head slightly tilted, lips pressed together in a subtle measure of appraisal as she noted the precision, the measured confidence, and the thoughtful attention to detail that Aaliyah carried in her every gesture. The students, previously caught between amusement and curiosity, now leaned slightly forward, exchanging soft, subtle glances as if each were confirming the unspoken realization that competence and character could command respect without needing to be loud or overt. The ambient light cast a soft glow across the polished stage floor, highlighting the shimmer of the piano keys and the attentive eyes around the room, each reflective surface amplifying the quiet acknowledgement that Aaliyah's preparation and poise had cultivated. Aaliyah exhaled, allowing her chest to rise and fall in a measured rhythm, her breathing steady as she took in the subtle shifts around her, the faint hum of the stage lights blending with the soft rustle of movement and whispers through the audience. The faint scent of varnish, combined with the lingering aroma of floral arrangements at the stage edges, created a sensory backdrop that anchored her to the present, reinforcing the confidence that had been nurtured through hours of quiet practice and careful observation. Brock's friends exchanged fleeting glances, their earlier bravado muted by the realization that the quiet assurance and deliberate control demonstrated by Aaliyah demanded recognition beyond mere social convention or habitual expectation. Principal Whitmore's subtle nod, almost imperceptible, carried the weight of acknowledgement, an unspoken signal that Aaliyah's performance, her composure, and her command of presence had shifted perception in a way that would resonate beyond this single auditorium. The gentle echo of her earlier piano notes lingered in the air, merging with the soft rhythm of attentive breathing, the collective focus of the audience a quiet testament to the authority she had claimed through skill, patience, and understated confidence. Each subtle gesture, each measured shift in posture, reinforced the recognition that had quietly taken root, a recalibration of attention and respect that could not be ignored. In this suspended space, Aaliyah felt the balance of perception tip, the seed of acknowledgement firmly planted within the room, and the awareness that the moments ahead could build upon this foundation, transforming tentative curiosity into sustained recognition, laying the groundwork for the influence, trust, and subtle authority she was beginning to establish among peers, faculty, and even those who had doubted her from the start. Brock Simmons shifted uneasily near the side of the stage, his usual confidence now tempered by a subtle unease as he observed Aaliyah Johnson with a new, unspoken awareness. The confident bravado that had carried him through years of assumed dominance seemed to waver under the steady gaze and composed presence of the student who had silently challenged the expectations he had taken for granted. Principal Karen Whitmore remained attentive, her head slightly tilted, lips pressed together as she continued to evaluate not just the performance she had witnessed, but the underlying poise, insight, and quiet determination that Aaliyah displayed with each measured movement. The students, once hesitant or distracted, now appeared fully engaged, leaning slightly forward, whispering softly among themselves, their eyes reflecting the dawning understanding that true competence could not be defined by appearances or previous assumptions. Aaliyah exhaled quietly, feeling the subtle shift in the energy around her, the weight of attention balancing between curiosity, respect, and cautious admiration, allowing her to anchor herself with steady breathing and mindful awareness of the polished stage beneath her feet. The faint scent of varnish and flowers mingled in the air, each inhalation reinforcing her focus and composure, reminding her that the quiet strength she carried had been honed through preparation, patience, and careful observation of the world around her. Brock's friends exchanged quick, uncertain glances, the laughter that had accompanied their earlier amusement replaced by silent recognition that Aaliyah's presence and steady authority demanded acknowledgement, a recalibration of the social hierarchy they had long relied upon. Principal Whitmore's subtle gestures, a slight nod of her chin and a careful adjustment of her notebook, conveyed a measured approval, acknowledging that the competence, clarity, and unwavering poise Aaliyah demonstrated were deserving of attention and could no longer be overlooked. The polished wooden floor, reflecting the warm stage lights, captured the subtle movements of hands and feet, emphasizing the quiet control and deliberate cadence of Aaliyah's gestures, each small motion reinforcing the perception of confidence and capability that had begun to permeate the room. The ambient hum of the lighting fixtures and the soft rustle of papers among the audience created a backdrop against which her composure was accentuated, the space around her responding subtly to the presence she commanded through poise rather than volume. Each breath, each micro-movement, served to solidify the recognition that had begun to emerge, a silent acknowledgement that careful preparation, steady determination, and deliberate confidence could quietly overturn assumptions, recalibrate perceptions, and establish authority in ways that were profound yet understated. In this suspended, attentive moment, the auditorium seemed to breathe with her, the previously rigid lines of social expectation giving way to an emerging awareness, a soft but undeniable shift that signaled the beginning of acknowledgement, the first hints of respect, and the quiet internal reckoning for those who had underestimated her. The auditorium was filled with a tangible shift, a quiet energy that had moved from hesitation and curiosity to subtle acknowledgement, and Aaliyah Johnson stood at the center of it all, steady and deliberate, her presence commanding attention without a single word beyond the carefully measured actions she had taken. The polished wood of the stage beneath her sneakers seemed to hum faintly with the echoes of her previous performance, each vibration reinforcing the quiet authority she now held over the room, a contrast to the previous undercurrent of doubt that had lingered moments before. Brock Simmons remained near the side curtain, his expression one of restrained astonishment. The habitual confidence in his posture softened as he observed the unfolding recognition of Aaliyah's composure and insight, realizing in an almost imperceptible way that the assumptions he had relied upon were incomplete and perhaps entirely misplaced. Principal Karen Whitmore's gaze was unwavering, sharp and thoughtful, taking in every detail of Aaliyah's stance, gestures, and subtle expressions, registering the consistency of character and poise that had been displayed, and the quiet precision of her movements spoke louder than any demonstration of authority could have. The audience, previously divided between whispers of amusement and curiosity, now sat in focused attention, subtle nods and quiet movements, signaling the gradual understanding that the quiet resolve and deliberate competence Aaliyah exhibited could not be dismissed, that it demanded recognition, and that respect was being earned without a single grand gesture or overt declaration. The soft hum of stage lights, combined with the lingering warmth of the polished floor and the faint scent of floral arrangements, created a sensory environment that reinforced her calm confidence, each inhalation anchoring her in the moment and strengthening her focus as the room responded to the quiet shift she had initiated. Brock's friends exchanged tentative glances, their earlier laughter replaced by soft, contemplative expressions, an acknowledgement that the dynamics they had previously counted on were being recalibrated by something both subtle and undeniably powerful. Principal Whitmore's slight, deliberate nod and the careful placement of her hands on the notebook signaled approval and recognition, a silent confirmation that preparation, skill, and steady composure had created a shift in perception and established a new measure of influence and trust. Aaliyah's gaze swept the audience once more, noting the attentive faces, the subtle changes in posture, and the quiet acknowledgement reflected in eyes previously skeptical, each element reinforcing the understanding that her deliberate presence had quietly transformed the energy of the room. The combination of lingering piano resonance, attentive observation, warm stage lighting, and reflective polish would all coalesce into a moment of suspended attention, a delicate balance of acknowledgement and anticipation that signaled the final stages of recognition and the solidification of her quiet authority. In this measured, poised space, Aaliyah Johnson experienced the culmination of preparation, focus, and subtle influence, establishing not only acknowledgement from her peers and Principal Whitmore, but also planting the seeds for trust, collaboration, and the unfolding of the subsequent opportunities that would follow from the transformation she had achieved in this single, deliberate sequence of moments. The auditorium had fallen into a calm resonance, the warmth of the overhead lights highlighting the polished stage and the attentive faces of students and teachers alike as Aaliyah Johnson stood with a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate outward, touching every corner of the room with a subtle but unmistakable authority. The faint hum of the lights, the residual vibrations of the piano, and the soft shuffle of papers and shifting feet created a gentle rhythm that underscored the transformation in perception she had carefully cultivated, the space now fully acknowledging the composure and poise that had guided her through every measured step of the performance. Brock Simmons, still near the side curtain, adjusted his stance with a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture acknowledging the unexpected shift in balance, the realization that the quiet strength, preparation, and thoughtful confidence Aaliyah exhibited had irrevocably altered the dynamics he had previously assumed were fixed. Principal Karen Whitmore rose from her seat with deliberate grace, her eyes reflecting the satisfaction of recognition, and she approached the stage with a measured pace, notebook in hand but set aside as she extended a subtle invitation to Aaliyah, a gesture that spoke of trust, opportunity, and acknowledgement without need for loud declaration. The audience remained in a respectful quiet, their earlier murmurs replaced by attentive observation, subtle nods, and the gentle acknowledgement that a student who had been underestimated could quietly, deliberately, and competently command both attention and respect, reshaping perceptions in a way that was lasting and profound. Aaliyah exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle comfortably around her shoulders, the polished wood beneath her feet anchoring her to the stage, each breath measured and steady, reinforcing the calm certainty she had cultivated through preparation, reflection, and careful attention to detail. Brock's friends exchanged soft glances, their previous confidence tempered by recognition of the competence they had overlooked, a silent acknowledgement of the recalibration of social understanding within the auditorium. Principal Whitmore's subtle but deliberate gestures, the gentle tilt of her head, and the small, approving nods signaled an internal acknowledgement that extended beyond the moment itself, conveying trust in Aaliyah's ability to contribute, influence, and guide in ways that would extend far beyond the immediate performance. The soft scent of varnished wood, combined with the faint floral aroma at the edges of the stage, provided a sensory grounding for the audience, reinforcing the quiet but profound shift in energy that had taken place, the acknowledgement of integrity, preparation, and calm authority settling into the collective consciousness of the room. Aaliyah allowed her gaze to sweep across the audience one final time, noting each subtle change in posture, each reflective glance, the gentle recognition of effort, character, and poise now fully acknowledged, and she felt the culmination of all her preparation, focus, and deliberate actions crystallize into a sense of quiet accomplishment. In the suspended warmth of that final moment, with the attentive eyes of students, peers, and Principal Whitmore upon her, the stage no longer served simply as a platform for performance, but as a space where preparation, resilience, and quiet authority had transformed perception, creating a lasting recognition that Aaliyah Johnson's presence, poise, and deliberate confidence could inspire respect, trust, and subtle influence in ways that would continue to unfold long after the lights dimmed and the room emptied.